One humid morning in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his private study. Outside, the city was slowly waking to the dusty golden light of a new day. Traffic murmured in the distance. Soldiers changed shifts at the palace gates, and a rooster crowed somewhere beyond the walls. But inside, all was still. Traoré sat hunched over a stack of intelligence reports and diplomatic memos. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every word with the intensity of a man who knew he was surrounded by enemies, visible and invisible. In recent months, his firm rejection of Western influence had made him a symbol of hope to some and a threat to many more. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," he said. Kamara, his communications officer, entered quickly but respectfully. She was young, efficient, and one of the few staff members he truly trusted. "Mr. President," she said, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. "This arrived just now. No return address, no stamps. It was hand-delivered by a man in black. No insignia." He said nothing. "But the diplomatic seal is authentic." Traoré took the envelope carefully. It was heavier than most, sealed with red wax, and bore unfamiliar symbols pressed into the seal. Symbols that made his pulse quicken. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a single letter, handwritten in deliberate strokes. At the bottom was a name that stopped him cold. Kim Jong Un. For a long moment, Traoré didn't move. Then he read the first line. "To President Ibrahim Traoré, a fellow warrior against the empire." The letter was long, filled with flowery language and precise intention. Kim praised Traoré's stand against Western domination and called him a rising force on the African continent. He spoke of shared struggle, of sovereign resistance, of new alliances. And then came the offer. North Korea wished to support Burkina Faso. Military technology, tactical intelligence, economic resources, satellite data, political cooperation. "You are being watched, President Traoré," the letter read, "and you are being targeted because you represent a future they fear. But you are not alone. North Korea stands ready to help. All we ask in return is discretion and loyalty." Traoré slowly folded the letter and leaned back in his chair. A drop of sweat rolled down his neck. Kamara stood still, watching his expression. "Is it dangerous?" she asked softly. "It's not a threat," he said, eyes still on the envelope. "It's a mirror." Kamara didn't press further. Later that evening, a second message arrived, this time through a secure channel. An envoy from Pyongyang would arrive in 48 hours. No name, no photo, just a time. Traoré called an emergency meeting with his inner circle in a secure room beneath the palace. General Bakari Doka, his military chief, was first to speak. "Mr. President," he said gravely, "nothing from North Korea is ever simple. What does Kim want from us?" Minister Farida Lay, a brilliant but calculating economist, tapped her fingers on the table. "Friendship doesn't arrive in sealed envelopes. He wants something, and we need to know what." "It's real," Traoré replied, placing the letter before them. "And it's bold. But is it right for us? That's what we must decide." 2 days later, a black unmarked vehicle pulled into the back entrance of the presidential compound. A man stepped out, tall, pale-skinned, wearing a plain gray suit and dark glasses. He introduced himself only as Mr. He carried a slim black briefcase and bowed stiffly to Traoré. "President Traoré," he said in excellent French, "Chairman Kim sends his deepest respect and admiration. He considers you a brother in the fight for sovereignty, and he believes your life is in danger." Hyun wasted no time. In the meeting room, he opened the briefcase and spread its contents. Satellite images, intercepted communications, photographs of alleged Western intelligence operatives in Burkina Faso, some embedded in foreign NGOs, others posing as diplomats. "They are watching you," Hyun said calmly, "waiting for you to falter, preparing to remove you." Traoré's eyes scanned the photos. Some faces he recognized, others were new. But the message was clear. "And you?" he asked. "Why help us?" Hyun adjusted his glasses. "Because your fall would echo across the global south, and because our enemies are the same. Minister Lay spoke up. And what do you want in return? Hyun turned to her. Only loyalty, only understanding of the seriousness of this alliance. Traore stood and walked toward the window. He looked out over Ouagadougou, the crowded streets, the children playing in alleyways, the soldiers guarding intersections. His country was young, fragile, full of potential and full of danger. This isn't just help, he said quietly. This is history. Hyun nodded. History only favors the bold. Mr. President, as the meeting concluded, Hyun handed over a black phone the size of a deck of cards. If you decide to accept the chairman's offer, he said, call the number preloaded. Say only the words, we are aligned. Nothing more. That night, long after the palace had gone quiet, Traore sat alone in his study. The letters sat before him, the black phone beside it. The future was no longer something he could ignore. It was on his desk, staring back at him. The morning after Mr. Hyun's departure, President Ibrahim Traoré woke with an unusual heaviness. Though his night had been filled with little sleep and long stares into the ceiling, the weight he felt now wasn't fatigue. It was decision. He walked through the garden behind the presidential residence, surrounded by mango trees and tight security. The city beyond the walls of the compound moved with its usual noise. Vendors shouting, motorcycles honking, and the drone of overhead helicopters. But within the garden, only the crunch of his boots on gravel could be heard. Farida Lay joined him minutes later, a folder tucked under her arm. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, only her signature gray suit. The intelligence is real, she said without waiting for a greeting. 3 of the operatives Mr. Hyun identified are confirmed. 2 more are under surveillance. Traoré didn't respond at first. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. What about the communications intercepts? They're authentic. Our own team has matched the encryption stuff. Someone is feeding updates about your movements to a foreign agency. Likely the CIA, possibly France too. He stopped walking. So we're surrounded. More than that, she said, lowering her voice. We're infiltrated. Later that afternoon, Traoré met with General Duca in the palace war room. The room had no windows and was lined with steel. Its only decoration was a large digital map of the region and a portrait of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero. Duca stood beside the map, pointing to military bases across the north and east. If the West decides to move against you, it won't be a diplomatic push. It'll be internal destabilization, followed by a coup. Just like in Mali, just like in Libya. And we're not ready? Traoré asked. We're never ready for betrayal, Mr. President. The 2 men exchanged a long look, one born of trust, history, and shared battles. Then came the message. A new letter had arrived, this time from the United States Embassy. Marked urgent, it requested a direct meeting between Traoré and a senior U.S. official who had arrived discreetly in the city of Bobo Dioulasso. It was a clear signal. Washington knew what was happening and wanted to get ahead of it. Set the meeting, Traoré said, but not in Bobo. They come here on our terms. 2 days later, Robert G. Mitchell, Special Envoy for African Affairs, walked into the presidential compound. He wore a dark suit, smiled too quickly, and introduced himself with the smooth confidence of a man used to deals and pressure. The meeting was held behind closed doors without cameras. President Traoré, Mitchell said, taking a seat across from him. We're concerned about some of your recent communications, particularly with actors who pose a threat to regional stability. Traoré didn't blink. You mean North Korea? I mean instability, Mitchell replied, leaning forward. Look, I'll be blunt. We've seen this path before. Leaders reaching for dangerous alliances. It never ends well for them or their people. What are you offering instead? Traoré asked. Stability, continued aid, access to trade, diplomatic channels, respect in the international community. Traoré let out a short laugh. Respect? Is that what you call it? What you gave Gaddafi before you destroyed him? What you gave Sankara before he was betrayed? Mitchell's face hardened. That kind of talk won't help you, and your threats won't scare me. Traoré snapped. The room fell silent. Then Mitchell leaned back, his voice quieter now. Don't make an enemy out of the West. President, we can be friends, but we can also isolate you, economically, politically, even internally. You won't even see it coming. Traore stood, slowly. You think I don't already feel the noose tightening? I know how this works. I've read the cables. I've seen what happens to men who don't bow. But I didn't come here to bow. Mitchell rose as well. You still have time. Don't waste it. As the envoy left, Traore remained standing, heart pounding. There it was. The line had been drawn, and he had chosen his side. That night, he returned to the phone given to him by Mr. Hyun. He stared at it for a long time. Then, with a steady hand, he picked it up, dialed the number and said 4 words. We are aligned now. The connection cut immediately. No reply, no confirmation. But the signal had been sent. The next morning, security forces in Ouagadougou reported unusual drone activity near the outskirts of the city, interference with palace communications, anonymous digital attacks on government servers. The West was already responding, but Traore no longer flinched. He had made his choice, and history, for better or worse, was about to be rewritten. In the early hours before dawn, Ouagadougou was unnaturally quiet. The usual city sounds, roosters, early traders, the clanking of delivery carts were missing. Instead, a dense stillness hung over the capital, like the breath before a storm. President Ibrahim Traoré stood on the balcony of his private residence, overlooking the central square. His eyes were locked on the horizon, where the first hints of light threatened to pierce the night. He hadn't slept, not since he made the call. Behind him, General Duca entered without knocking. The man's face was tense. It's begun, he said. What's the situation? Traoré asked, turning. Several power substations in the northern district went dark an hour ago. Our cyber defense unit was hit with a coordinated attack overnight. They managed to contain it, but the intrusions were sophisticated. We believe the source is external, possibly US or French intelligence. Any movement on the ground? Duca nodded grimly. Yeah, we picked up encrypted chatter. There's talk of a strike, internal, military. Traoré's jaw tightened. Our own men? We believe so. A splinter cell within the 3rd Mechanized Brigade. Trained abroad, bought off. The words hit like a slap. The 3rd was one of the most decorated units in the Burkinabe military. We have loyalists in place? Traoré asked. Enough to hold, but only if we act now. Traoré turned back to the balcony. Below, the city was still sleeping. He had always known this day might come. Still, knowing it and living it were 2 different things. Detain the suspects, he said. Seal the bases. No announcements, no drama. Quiet containment. Yes, Mr. President. As Duca left, Traoré returned to his desk. The letter from Kim Jong Un remained beside the black phone, as if watching him. He picked it up again, rereading the final line. Together we will not fall. He hoped the words weren't just poetry. By mid-morning, a private jet bearing no national flag landed at the restricted military airstrip outside Ouagadougou. A black van met it on the tarmac and drove directly to the palace under armed escort. Inside the van were 2 men, both North Korean intelligence officers. They didn't speak during the drive. Mr. Hyun was waiting in the presidential briefing room. They have begun to move, he said without pleasantries. But so have we. He placed a metal case on the table. Inside were encrypted laptops, satellite phones, and a small projector. The chairman sends this, he said, turning on the projector. A map of West Africa appeared, layered with red zones, communications nodes and routes. You are not alone, Mr. President, Hyun continued. There are others, leaders like you, who are watching. They are waiting to see if you stand. If you survive this, alliances will shift across the continent. Traoré leaned forward, studying the map. What about our border defenses, he asked. Hyun tapped a section of the screen. We have supplied electronic jammers, motion trackers, and portable radar units. They are being installed now by your loyalists. If an external force attempts to breach your borders, you'll know. And internally? Traoré asked. If more of my own men turn against me, Hyun hesitated. Then it will become a war, and you must be prepared to act like a wartime president. There was a long silence. Finally, Traoré spoke. And what does North Korea gain from this? Hyun looked him straight in the eye. We gain a partner. one not poisoned by Western influence, one who can become the first domino in a new alignment. Traore didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. Later that afternoon, a convoy of armored vehicles surrounded the 3rd Mechanized Brigade's main compound. Using security access codes, General Duca's loyalists swept in, detaining 7 officers suspected of collaborating with foreign agents. One tried to flee and was shot in the leg. Another detonated a signal jammer and destroyed the base's communication relay. But it was enough. The coup attempt was blunted, at least for now. News spread quickly through the upper ranks. Some were shocked, others were terrified, and a few quietly angry. That night, Traore addressed his inner circle again. Farid Alay sat to his left, Duca to his right, and Mr. at the far end of the table. "We have crossed a line," the president said. "The West knows it, and they will respond. But I will not be the African leader who backs down when pressured. I will not let fear write our future." Hyun didn't smile, but he nodded. "The next move," Farida said, "will not be political. It will be economic. They'll freeze our reserves, cut our aid, block our imports. We'll survive," Traore replied. "We'll adapt." "Sir," Duca said carefully, "you may survive, but many will not. If sanctions hit, people will suffer, and that suffering could turn into unrest." Traore nodded. "Then we'll prepare the people. They deserve to know the truth." At that moment, a palace aide rushed in, eyes wide with panic. "Sir, you need to see this." He turned on the wall monitor. A major French news network was broadcasting a breaking alert. Unconfirmed reports of instability in Burkina Faso. U.S. State Department expresses concern. Rumors of military unrest. The narrative was already being shaped. Traore watched silently, then turned to Mr. Hyun. "It begins now," he said. Hyun replied in a quiet voice, "And it will not end quickly." The morning sky over Ouagadougou was the color of ash. A sandstorm had rolled in during the night, covering the streets in a pale film of dust. The city moved slower, quieter, but within the walls of the presidential compound, there was no calm. President Ibrahim Traoré sat in a secured room beneath the palace, surrounded by screens, maps, and advisors. A war room, formerly symbolic, had now become a lifeline. Minister Farid Alay was briefing him on the latest developments. "The Central Bank of West African States has frozen our government accounts," she said. "Following pressure from Washington and Paris, nearly 70% of our liquid reserves are untouchable." "And food shipments?" Traoré asked, his voice low. "Being rerouted." 2 convoys from Ghana were stopped at the border this morning. Officially, they cite security risks, but we know the truth. President Traoré clenched his jaw. "The West is building a noose, and they're doing it fast." General Duca entered with urgency. "We've intercepted communications from within our ranks. A second wave of dissent is rising. Not just soldiers, civilian administrators, mayors, governors. They think aligning with the West will save their positions. They're cowards," Farida said, "and cowards are dangerous when they panic." Traoré leaned over the table, pressing his palms against the cold surface. "We need a counter-message, one that reaches the people before fear does." He stood up, prepare a national address. That night, every radio frequency and television signal in Burkina Faso was overridden. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the people saw their president seated at his desk, hands folded, expression calm but determined. "To the citizens of Burkina Faso," he began, "a storm is coming, but storms are not new to us. Foreign powers fearing our strength, fearing our independence, have begun to act. They have frozen our accounts, blocked our supplies, and spread lies about our government. They say we are unstable, but I tell you now, what they fear is not chaos. What they fear is that we have finally stood up." He paused. "You may suffer, but we will suffer with purpose. You may struggle, but that struggle will not be in vain. For every generation there comes a time when people must choose between the comfort of chains and the hardship of freedom. I have made my choice. Now, I ask you, will you stand with me?" The country erupted. On social media, in village squares, across university campuses, and army barracks, The speech spread like wildfire. Most responded with unity, others with skepticism, but no one could ignore it. In the hours after the address, something unexpected happened. From the city of Kaya in the north to Banfora in the southwest, volunteers began to organize. They formed defense units, set up community food banks, started information patrols to counter propaganda. It wasn't military support, it was moral resistance. But the enemy was not idle. In Abidjan, diplomats from France, the United States, and several West African governments met in secret. The alliance that had kept colonial control alive through trade, debt, and fear was now under threat. Traoré wasn't just another nationalist. He was becoming a symbol. If Burkina Faso could resist, others might follow. They've elevated him, one French diplomat muttered. We should have cut him off before the letter from Pyongyang ever reached him. Then let's make sure he never gets to read the next one. Another replied. The plan moved quickly. Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré was in his office with Mr. Hune when the alert came in. Sir, a security officer said through the intercom, an explosion has just occurred near the Ministry of Communications. Casualties confirmed. Initial reports suggest a planted device. Hune remained stone-faced. Diversion. From what? Traoré asked. Just then his encrypted phone buzzed. It was General Duca. We've got unidentified drones over the western perimeter. 4 of them. No IFF signatures. They're jamming our radar. Activate the countermeasures, Traoré said, standing. I already have. Duca replied. But if they're moving this quickly, it means they've decided this isn't pressure anymore. This is assault. Hune turned toward the president. Chairman Kim has authorized us to escalate our level of support. What does that mean? Traoré asked. It means we're going to level the field. Within hours, North Korean tactical experts began transferring encrypted data to Burkina Faso military intelligence, radar jamming techniques, drone disciplers, low-orbit satellite imagery. It was the kind of technology Burkina Faso had never touched until now. The West had underestimated the alliance. At midnight, an unmarked plane landed at a secured strip near the capital. On board were 6 crates marked only with coded serial numbers. Inside, electromagnetic disruptors and field communications encryption devices. But not all battles would be fought with tech. 2 governors in the central region issued statements denouncing Traoré's leadership and calling for a return to international cooperation. It was the beginning of a soft rebellion, less dramatic than a coup but equally dangerous. Traoré called for an emergency council. If we arrest them, we confirm their narrative, but if we do nothing, they become a rallying point, then expose them. Farida said, publicly, no, surgically, leak proof of their foreign financing. Let the people discredit them before we ever touch them. Mr. Hune nodded approvingly. Information is the first strike of modern warfare. And so it was done. Within hours, leaked documents began appearing on encrypted messaging channels, bank transfers from European NGOs, emails linking the governors to foreign embassies. It was enough. The public turned. The governors backpedaled. One resigned the next day. It was a victory, but a small one. Traoré stood at his window that night, the city lights blinking dimly through the dust. We're holding the line, he said softly. But for how long? Farida whispered from behind. And no one had the answer. The sun rose red over Ouagadougou. A dry wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the dust of the Sahel and the weight of something heavier, uncertainty. Yet in the heart of the capital, the flame of resistance still burned. President Ibrahim Traoré walked alone through the courtyard of the presidential compound. His aides had begged him to remain inside, but he refused. Let them see I'm still here, he'd said. Let them see I'm not hiding. The courtyard was lined with soldiers, not just elite guards, but volunteers, farmers, students, former civil servants who had taken up arms in defense of their country. What began as a warning from a distant nation had become a war of identity. Inside the palace, the situation room was tense. We have confirmation, said Minister Faridale. The US and France have greenlit a multi-stage operation. They're working through ECOWAS to legitimize military intervention. Nigeria is being pressured to lead it. General Duca added, we have 4 days, maybe less. After that, they'll have a regional coalition. and justification. Are we prepared? Traore asked. Duka hesitated. Militarily? No. Morally? Absolutely. Hyun entered moments later, calm as ever. Chairman Kim has authorized Phase 2. You will receive an additional package this evening. It contains hardware that may alter the course of the engagement. Let me guess, Traore said. The kind of hardware we're not supposed to have. Hyun didn't answer. Instead, he handed over a sealed black case. It's better if only you know. Traore took the case and dismissed the room. Alone in his office, he opened it. Inside was a single device, sleek, minimal, deadly. Alongside it, a short note in red ink. For use only, a Burkina Faso must become ungovernable to remain uncolonized. Traore closed the case slowly. It was a last resort, a terrible one, but a real option. Later that night, as the wind howled over the city, the people began to gather again. Not in protest, but in declaration. From rooftops and street corners, voices rose together. Burkina Faso will not kneel. The chant spread across cities. It reached the borders. It reached even the prisons where political dissidents chanted in unison with their guard. Something deeper than politics had taken root. Something no intervention could easily suppress. Still, the enemy advanced. Foreign media painted Traoré as a rogue dictator. Satellite channels repeated claims of human rights abuses, collapsed governance, economic ruin. Sanctions tightened, borders closed. Rumors of a multinational force massing in Niger grew louder. But Traoré remained steady. Then came the message that changed everything. A classified cable intercepted by Burkinabe intelligence showed that the planned intervention would include the assassination of Traoré as its first step, either by drone or covert agent. It was a red line, one that had now been crossed in planning if not yet in execution. General Duka was furious. We have to strike first. Preemptive action. Let the world know we will not be hunted. No, Traoré replied. We let the world know we will not be erased. There's a difference. The next day he delivered his final national address. To my people, I may not survive this, but I was never meant to survive in chains. If they kill me, do not let my death be your silence. Let it be your battle cry. Do not let fear decide our fate. Let faith in our future guide us. Let our children say, they tried to break us, but we became unbreakable. If this is my end, let it be the beginning of something far greater. The broadcast spread like wildfire. The speech was played on loop across African countries, translated into French, Arabic, Hausa, Swahili. It reached cities in South America, townships in South Africa, even subway platforms in Seoul. Ibrahim Traoré had become more than a president. He had become a symbol, and symbols, unlike men, cannot be killed. That night, under heavy security, Traoré was moved to a hidden command center beneath the hills outside the capital. The palace remained lit, a decoy. Hyun vanished from the public eye. So did Duka. Farida Lay remained to hold the political line. The battle was no longer about territory. It was about narrative, about endurance. Within days, attacks escalated. 3 simultaneous drone strikes hit government installations. Internet access across Burkina Faso was throttled. Coordinated riots were reported in the West. Mercenaries were rumored to be operating under foreign contracts. But the people did not fall. Each strike birthed more volunteers. Each lie birthed more truth. And each threat birthed more resolve. In the end, the West did not succeed. The intervention stalled. International opinion shift. African nations that had once remained silent began to voice support, not for war, but for dignity, for the right of a sovereign people to decide their future. And Ibrahim Traoré, he re-emerged weeks later, thinner, grayer but unbroken. He walked through the same courtyard where he had once stood alone, and this time he was surrounded by thousands. Farmers, mothers, soldiers, children. He raised his hand. The crowd fell silent, and he said only one word: forward. It was not the end. It was the beginning of a new Africa.